Hi, everybody. Welcome to my stream today. Um, uh, actually, I'm very excited to introduce our guest into our stream today, and we're gonna talk about the decolonization and also all the what's been going on in the U.S. UK from POC and Black people perspective. And let's just not wait any longer. Let's introduce our guest today. And of course, it's always my good comrade here, Silver Spook. Hi, how are you?
Hey, aloha, everybody, and Luna. Yeah, always good to be back. Um,
Mm,
and yeah, we're doing okay. It's a little bit rainy, but anyways, yeah. Anyways, I think most people know who I am, but yeah, I am Silver Spook. I'm a native Hawaiian and activist here, and also I make YouTube videos and content, and I make video games like Decolonators with Luna that you probably know about. And other
yes.
games, yeah, which is about fighting colonization and decolonizing in a certain sense and fighting capitalists in Vietnam, but I also make games about fighting it in other places like Neofeud and in Digistar. And I like to make games that are entertaining but also educational from an indigenous and left perspective. Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here. And now let's introduce another guest. Our stream today is Saber. Welcome. Can you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Hello, hello. First of all, mic check. How do I sound?
Yeah, you sound great.
Cool, cool. Yeah, hello everyone. Yeah, I mean, I think this is probably the first time that I've done a face
Exactly.
thing, which is quite interesting. I just thought, you know what, it's about time, after a long
Yeah.
hiatus. But for those who don't know, I make video essays. Uh, Sporadically, I have a bunch of stuff planned for those who are still waiting for me to post again. So look forward to that. But I mainly make videos related to like Afrofuturisty related things or like things with an Afrofuturistic lens. I'm also talking about some political stuff, some economic stuff, as well as diving into like African history, where we are today, as well as like looking to the future to see how we can get the best possible like outcome for ourselves, not only as Africans but just as a general like global working class as well. So yeah, it's a pleasure to be on. Appreciate the invite.
Good to see you for the first time, Saber.
Indeed.
Yeah, exactly. I was just asking, like, how are you, you know, over there recently? The news about, where you're living. Is there any news over there? Like,
Oh, do you mean
important?
in terms of Elizabeth, the Queen, so called?
Oh, yeah. I mean, like, like the 10 days of mourning.
Yeah.
Manufacturer warnings. Is it end yet?
It's uh for some people, yes. I think for I don't know. I'll say this much. It's very interesting to see just how much people actually do care about the monarchy. I remember doing some research for some videos in the past and looking at how like I think the number was over 50% of people still saw the sort of British Empire favorably. So talking about past type thing, but it was living in London, which is a somewhat more progressive place on the surface, anyways. Um, it was hard to sort of rationalize that and to actually see that in a day to day because we don't really talk about the monarchy unless something happens within the monarchy. So for instance, if something's going on with Meghan Markle or something else, or there's some scandal here and there with uh Prince Andrew, stuff like that. Um but yeah, with this recent news of Elizabeth passing, it was very shocking to see just how much people actually do like hold significant hold significance for the monarchy in that way, not only within the UK but also globally as well. Like so many things
Yeah.
sort of ground to a halt just because Elizabeth had passed,
Yeah,
which is
it's
strange because it's just
weird.
one person, right? It's one person. It's very strange. And as you said, right,
I
it's almost like a forced mourning. I don't think I've ever seen a situation on this scale where we've all been forced to be upset about the passing of this person, which I still can't wrap my head around to this day. There's times where I visited a bar the other day, and whilst I was in there, like they just didn't play any music because they were mourning the passing of Elizabeth. And I was like, okay, so you're not gonna shut down business, you're just gonna turn the music off, which is like the most superficial thing that you can do to
uh-huh. Uh-huh.
share your appreciation for the death of this person. And I'm just like, geez, what's going on right now? On sort of like real estate websites, or like, when you
Mm.
go past and you see those stores that are like selling houses and stuff like that, and you see the sort of the house and the description of the house and the prices and stuff, on many of them, the picture of the house has just been replaced by Elizabeth, just there. I'm just like, what does that have to do with anything related
Like,
to your business, right? And
yeah,
but
exactly. I
the
don't
saving grace
understand
there,
it.
yeah, before you go on, before like the saving grace, I'd say is that like there was a few instances where I did see some anti-imperial action. So there was this poster that was just up, and I saw these people going up and basically basically putting some anti-imperialist propaganda over the top of it and being like, all right, down with the monarchy type thing. And I was like, all right, gives me some hope for the future in this country. So yeah, I mean, it's been an interesting past few weeks, I'd say that much. But it's unfortunate that there is no sign of that. There's no sign that this monarchy will change or really end in any way, right? It's almost like this was a reaffirming uh, of the whole structure of the system and how much influence it has on the rest of the world, including formerly colonized nations as well, that are also paying their respects or paying their tributes to the to the monarchy too, which is the most wildest thing to me. But yeah, anyways, yeah, I'm curious to see, like, from your perspective, from both of you and from everyone else who's listening as well, like, what was it like from your perspective outside of the UK, outside of London, to actually like witness it, and like, has it impacted you in your day-to-day life and all that kind of thing?
By the way, before I start, yeah, I just fixed my audio volume a little bit, so I hope that it's better now, right? And yeah, and now let's say welcome our last guest, Lostsioux. Hi, how are you?
Hello,
Hey,
Hokaye. How's
Can you please
everyone
introduce
tonight?
yourself to the chat? Yeah, it's so nice to see you again.
Can we what?
Oh, you can go
Please,
introduce
yeah,
yourself.
please, yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, if you don't know who I am, hi. Yo chapo, oe chacha weche, oe chacha weche. Ye nakora oyate, ita chanchaga. So basically, hi everyone, I'm Lostsioux. I'm from the Dakota Nation up in the northern part of Turtle Island, um, where Canada tries to claim it owns, but it doesn't hold the title. Um, so hi.
It's so nice to have you here in our another panel. Back to the story about the Queen thing, Saber. It's very weird here in Vietnam too because they are we call them sort of the bootlickers. Yes, we do have liberals and bootlickers in Vietnam, and they act like their own grandma died or something, and we lots of Vietnamese will make fun of them like, what are you talking about? That's an old like woman, old like lady that died of old age after like she like enjoying all of the wealth her whole life, and literally like she just like king, like the queen of the literal kingdom that literally like try to help our colonizers, French and then the USA, and then the pawn pot with the Khmer Rouge. So like she deserved like no like no mourning of from Vietnamese people at all, but we still have people who cry. And then and we when we pointed that out, the truth about the empire and her, the queen herself, they're like, oh, don't you just have like respect to some dead people? No, I'm not gonna give it any respect for that specific kind of monarch. Like, so yeah, I feel you, like even in Vietnam, the country on the other side of the earth was used to be like colonized by those people, but yeah, we still mourn for that dead queen.
that is
It's
interesting. That is
unthinkable.
interesting.
It's
Yeah.
unthinkable. It's unthinkable.
Jeez, what
Don't
about
get
you,
me
Silver
started
Spook? What
on.
about you in Hawaii? How's it? How's it going over there in terms of
Oh
like?
yeah, I
Yeah.
I I wonder.
Oh, you're muted.
Oh, Silver, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I was gonna say, well, I mean, maybe I'll let Sue go first because technically the British Canada is the one that's directly on Sue. If you want to
Mm.
comment,
Yeah.
just reactions to the Queen. I don't know what you think, Sue.
Damn
Yeah,
it,
exactly,
y'all.
Sue.
Okay,
Are you
well,
the
first
property
things
of the
first.
queen?
Fuck no. Hell no. I never swore any allegiance, nor does the queen own my ass. My mom and my grandma and my grandpa own my ass. Or my kids, if you want to look at it that way. But no fucking queen owns me. Um, for us indigenous people, for a lot of us here in Canada, it's a mixed feelings between those who have been tremendously um, colonized through the genocide acts of residential schools that still believe the queen is like some great thing when it's not. And then there's those of us who are like, thank God, ding dong, the witch is dead, and are overjoyed and are wishing now that our governor general, who happens to be an Inuit woman, would shut down Canada and all of England's interests in subsidiaries in Canada completely, so that all of it reverts back to us Indigenous people, and that colonialism and shit can go fuck itself. Pardon my language, but yeah, the many of us are not. We're happy the witch is dead. There are many different questions that still need to be asked and answered. The queen, and when her husband was alive and kicking, used to come here and visit the residential schools and take children out of the residential schools on a so-called picnic, and were never seen anymore. We don't know where they are, what happened to them. So there's quite a few different things.
Yeah.
So for a lot of us, it's like, yes, like I said, ding dong, yay, the witch is dead. I can say some of our Irish relatives were doing the jig. We don't have like the United States isn't technically away from the crown rule, but it is in some aspects, but not completely. Canada, unfortunately, is stuck underneath the crown rule, and so nothing that we can do other than hope, like I said, that our governor general shuts down Canada and all of its subsidiaries, and we can get back to actually helping people live, rather than that bullshit queen that, you know what, for her funeral, England is spending $8 billion on her fucking funeral, while its
My
people are
gosh.
fucking
Wait a
starving.
minute, $8 billion?
$8
Oh,
billion
holy!
dollars, and the people are starving.
I didn't know that.
Banks shut
Holy
down everything, and they're tossing money on an old cranky old hag. All the people are starving and everything else, and having housing crisis and everything. So yeah, fuck that shit. Once again, sorry for my language, but
It's totally okay here. I curse a lot to Lostsioux, so don't worry at all. Bad man, $8 billion on what? Like
on her
what?
funeral,
I mean, like, but what does it do in the funeral? It costs like $8 billion. Jesus.
Is it the entire coffin made out of like the
Like
$400 million
diamond or
diamond
something?
that they
yeah,
stole from India? I don't know.
yeah, pretty much.
My gosh.
It's
I
pretty
mean,
wild.
okay.
Like it really does go to. Actually, does make a lot of sense when I consider like how much like changes there have been in the leading up to the funeral, and the actual like day, or like the big, like, I don't know, big send off ceremony which took place on Monday, so this past week. And geez, like I'm going through London, right, and I'm seeing, as I said, like, you know, the billboards and all of this kind of stuff, right? But you're seeing like lines stretching like several roads just of people just like queuing up just to walk past the coffin and to send their farewells. And I'm just like, geez. And you're seeing like all that, like, I can see the costs that go into maintaining that, because there's so many people hired to try to like even make that happen. There's security, like royal guards and stuff like that, like police force, of course, like media coverage as well, and obviously like just the costs of the actual like physical things too, like the coffins and stuff like that, and all of these things. It's just the money would really add up very, very quickly, just considering how how much the entire country was turned like almost upside down just to kind of make this happen, to put it all together, and the resources that would have gone into like making sure like everything went smoothly. So there's a lot of like, I don't know, unaccounted for, like money that's unaccounted for as well. But that's only, I think, even like putting that aside, I think that's only just like a small part of the the issue when it comes to like how much, like to what Sue was saying as well. It's like people in the country right now are dealing with a lot of crises and stuff like that, like compounding crises,
Yeah.
which is creating this like larger cost of living crisis, which is just like a culmination of a bunch of things.
Wait a minute, I just checked.
Yeah.
You know, like the poverty rate in the UK right now is 22%. So literally 1 in every 5 British is in poverty. And you spent 8 billion on the funeral of a dead woman. Oh,
Yeah,
gosh.
it's wild. It's wild.
Can I ask
the numbers
Saber?
get even crazier when. Oh yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask you, Saber. Was her casket made bulletproof, and that's why it cost so much?
I mean, I don't really know what the point of that would be, unless. Yeah.
Who's gonna waste the bullets like that?
Right, exactly. And there was even this thing going around where people were like, they're not even sure. Like, I don't know how much of this I believe or anything like that, but a lot of people were saying stuff like, I don't know how likely it is that she was actually in there. In the actual coma, because it's like, you know, her body's being flown around across the UK, going here, then people are going to go ahead and visit it. You know, you're thinking to yourself, well, I'm thinking to myself,
think that
you know what, like,
I'm
after that many days, really, like, you know, it, like,
yeah, really,
I know, body probably decomposes by then. I don't know what.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean?
Gosh.
So who knows? I don't know.
It definitely
the likelihood
starts
of
to
that.
smell.
You know?
It definitely starts to
exactly.
smell. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, who knows? Like whether or not she's actually. But the spectacle like proves the point, anyways. Like, I don't think like, I think it would have done its job regardless of whether or not she was in there. Like, the outcome probably would have been the same, unless someone would have actually gone in and tried to open it up. Which, again, considering the amount of armed forces that were there, that's almost highly unlikely, unless someone, I don't know, can teleport or something like that, something ridiculous like that. You know, so. But yeah, I mean, like, you know, leading on to what I was saying before, the costs is that, like, this ceremony itself costs a lot of money, but then when it comes to like inheritance and stuff like that, right? You have like all of this, you know, the promotion or the inheritance of the throne by so-called King Charles and stuff, or let's say the property basically being transferred over to him. You're talking about, and like there's like no inheritance tax, basically. That's one thing. And no, they're talking about billions of dollars worth of like land, basically, that is just like, or like basically like property that is just inherited, and like that in any other context would have been like, that inheritance tax would have gone into like basically the government, right? It would have been taxed. But they're just able to just take that money scot-free. It's one thing. And another thing too is just like just the monarchy in general, the fact that they have like, they're entitled to like a sovereign grant of perhaps like $100 million a year, the equivalent, roughly speaking, just because they're the royal family. They just get that money. They basically have a universal basic income for themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone else is just suffering.
Can't believe it.
Yeah, exactly. It's the most wildest thing. I can't even rationalize how people justify that, and not like, you know, for everyone else, you know.
Didn't they used to take down kings for that kind of shit back in the day?
Yeah, I mean, Vietnam did. I mean, this country, you know, quote unquote backward country on the outside of the earth, in the global south, in the Southeast Asia. You know what? In 1945, when, you know, we had the revolution, and then the Communist Party of Vietnam sent the letter to the king, because like we were at Hanoi in the north, and then the king was the palace was in the center of Vietnam. So like Ho Chi Minh and the Communist Party just sent a letter to the king like, hey, we got the revolution, we won, and can you please resign? The king sent a letter back, and then like, oh, I mean, like, he's still trying to keep his, you know, his royal chair, his kingdom like that, and then he suggested that Ho Chi Minh and the Communist Party of Vietnam to work for the king, and then we sent a second letter just saying, nah, just resign, please. And then yeah, the king after that resigned, and then that is the end of story. We gave them no chance whatsoever to like reclaim the throne or like take back their existence or something like that. And here's the thing too, I see a lot, I see the really I see it is a ridiculous kind of argument. Because a lot of people, lots of people in the West saying like, oh, their family, the royal families actually do not have any power, and they just keep them. We just keep them as tradition, like a good tradition, because the king and the queen did a lot of good things. And I tell like, dude, Vietnam don't like. Do you forget that we like 2,000 years being feudal, and we've been having kings and lords for 2,000 freaking years, and before maybe your country even existed. But where they got the revolution, it's just like, please resign this. Yeah, that's it. End of the story. That's it. And the King's also, yeah, did a lot of good things defending our country against our enemies, but nope, there's still no saving
I,
whatsoever
I
after the
gotta ask.
revolution.
I
Yeah.
gotta ask Saber. Saber, I gotta ask you, homie, straight up. Okay, how's it gonna work with Parliament having a king instead of a queen? I know with a queen, they purposely made sure that they took away a lot of her power and gave a lot of it to Parliament because God forbid a woman have any control. But how's that gonna work with a king? Is it gonna revert back to the old king system where the king was the one that had everything to say and Parliament just did whatever the king decided,
Yeah, I'm curious.
or
So,
what?
I was actually thinking about that quite a lot actually, because like technically, I mean, it's possible, but like the way that the system is set up is such that like a lot of the major decisions are made up by like or they're basically funneled through um towards the top, like through the House of Commons, House of Lords, and then once the final agreement is made, you basically have or like prior to the timely death of Elizabeth, just the signing off of those documents, and then everything else can just carry on. Obviously, she had the power to like veto and just like say, okay, this is not gonna happen, whatever. But like most of the time, like this, I don't think.
so she has the power of veto. Really? I didn't know
Yeah,
that. So fuck
yeah,
everybody who say that the queens have no power. Like what? She can literally
yeah,
veto the parliament's decisions.
Yeah, because I've been hearing
exactly.
that a
Yeah,
lot too, right? Well, I
yeah,
don't know what y'all are talking about because the queen like didn't have any power to do anything.
Yeah,
It
just
was
for
Parliament.
tourism.
Yeah.
They
right, right.
literally
Yeah.
live in palace that can turn
Mm.
into beautiful museum or the sightseeing or destination for tourists. But literally, they live there, so we cannot just go there and take a look and visit
Mm.
it. Like this is what for tourism? Excuse me, what?
Mm.
People weird, like
Right, right,
I'm
right.
sorry, but white people are weird because we, no, like people of color who've been like just saying fuck to the royal family for so long. We try to decolonize us, but they just like they call us backwards. And they are the civilized, like they want to civilize us, but they literally defend a feudal system. It's
Mhm.
it's
Yes,
wild.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it could very much be. Oh yeah, go ahead, go ahead, go ahead. Speak. You haven't spoken
Oh
in a
no, I was
while.
just gonna say, because like, I mean, because I was reading the article about how the Queen actually has power that, like, in some senses, the Queen has more power than the U.S. president. Because she can, if she like, it's like, I think specifically, it's kind of like what are the Westerners write down whatever laws. It doesn't really matter. They just rip up laws whenever they feel like you can occupy a sovereign country and then claim that it's all fine because, well, it's not fine, but we don't care. We're the United States occupying Hawaii till this day. So I mean, I don't trust anything that anybody who writes anything down on paper, which is a stolen Asian Chinese technology anyway. It's all bullshit,
Mm,
including the
mm.
plagiarized constitutions. But the
Yeah.
Queen on paper at least has even on paper that their Westerners are constantly lying on. She has the power to literally stop any law that can impact private interests, which is like basically everything, right? That's capitalist power. That's feudalist power. And also, that's why I made the game called Neo Feud. That's like literally about techno kings that are the CEOs of corporations. They're CEO slash kings and queens who sit on thrones that are made of like artificial intelligent empires where they control fleets of autonomous drones and robots with they're the only like the Asimovian rule, like in science fiction, is the only rule is no robot can allow harm to come to the reigning CEO, billionaire / monarch at the time. That's the only rule, right? There's no not harming humans, right? And it's like, because I mean, the way that I look at it, right, is like one of the big lies of the West and the so-called, I call them the unhealed descendants of Roman trauma. That's all of Western Europe, basically, who have said that they have progressed, right, from this backward, uncivilized, savage slavery, and the things that are in the dark hordes of the East and the South have these things called barbarism, right? Everything east of West Germany, and those places have barbarian, authoritarian, communism, fascism, something, just bad stuff's out there. Orcs is out there, and in South, in Africa, there's just like darkness down there, and that's bad, But in Europe, we've progressed. The word progressive, right? Karl Marx's boss, Horace Greeley, was a progressive, and he said that Asians are backward, debaucherous, and all their women are prostitutes of the highest order. He was a progressive.
Oh gosh!
And that was just the Asians. He had worse words for the Africans, indigenous people of Turtle Island, and the Pacific Islanders, right? And so the progress, right? That's kind of my main point of my game. I keep bringing, and now it's the perfect time to bring it up, because it's like we of Europe, the civilization that has descended from the Greeks and Romans, by the way, Asian and African civilizations taught basically most of the things that they knew, but that's part of the erasure. But we have progressed from Greece and Rome through these periods of feudalism to what? To since the time of the revolutions, because some of us are losing heads, we have progressed, right, towards democratic capitalism, where we have equal opportunity, and we have progressed beyond feudalism, right? And we only have symbolic monarchies, and we have democratic. And so that whole all of that, the entire history of the West, which is that we're moving upward. I argue, like, in part of the point of view of it is like, the West has actually regressed from the time, even the Roman Empire, which did colonize and wipe out languages in what used to be indigenous, coexisting British islands, with the exception of the Celts and a handful of other places. There once was a Gaul, there once were multiple languages in what's now France. And now they're all a monoculture, imperial, capitalistic, feudalistic, right? Well, they cut a few heads off, but they still have royal bankers, in France. But they're very good at pretending. The Americans are very good at hiding their royalty, except when Elon calls himself Techno King. Then it gets hard to hide the royalty, right? But it's like basically the same system exists, right? But then they accuse everyone else, right, of, as you said, being savage, being barbaric. Africa, this dark place where we have to force all the black people to stay in the war zone, because there's something about just barbarism inside the DNA. Hawaiians just have barbarism inside of their skin. When you have a wide nose, that makes you a barbarian. It's basically it's racism, it's colonialism, it's capitalism, it's feudalism. But unlike the Romans, couldn't nuke the entire planet and destroy the capacity of Earth to support life. The British Empire and the French of the 16, 17, 18, 1900s could not destroy the entire capacity of Earth to support life. Today, these handful of, West Asian clowns are destroying everything, and they have the capacity, and they're trying to get everyone nuked in Russia and China at the same time on their NED funded democracy, supporting separatist borders. So it's really like there has not. I mean, my nephew argument is there has been zero progress in the West. They have not moved from feudalism. They still have a monarch who is just as powerful, if not more power. Elon Musk is the descendant of lords and ladies. 90% of all the millionaires and billionaires of Britain and the United States are the direct descendants, even though they try to hide it, of a royal-blooded people, aristocrats. So they have just got really good at hiding their continued 2,000-year descent. And anyway, that's a long rant, but fuck those people.
Yeah,
I think you're right
exactly.
about that. I think I agree. Yeah. Like I've noticed that, like, it seems like it's just better. Like they've just gotten better at like hiding the fact that it's an empire, or like hiding the sort of internal workings of like what the outcomes actually is. Because like
Exactly.
and I think like that's almost like it's almost like something that people would see, and it's worked so well that like this is why people buy into it so much, because they can't see the emperor like fully just in sort of in the way that it was done in the past. Like it's not as explicit, it's not as overt as it is. But I think the interesting thing about like the systems that we operate under now is that like there's so much of an emphasis on just hiding the fact that this is going on, because like, you know, in that sense it's allowed to continue to perpetuate. You know, I mean, this is the whole idea of like Silver Spook, of course, with neo feudalism, is that like this is still happening. Like those power structures are still in place in a lot of ways, but
Yeah.
it's just that it's harder to see because it's not as it's sort of been hidden.
Yeah,
It's as
exactly.
though the it's basically just like feudalism with better marketing. Basically, it's essentially like that's essentially like what's happening. It's like how do you hide something that's so like expansive, so massive, and it encapsulates the entire planet and even like beyond the planet now as well. And like we're
Yeah.
now at a stage where we are, you know, it isn't just the case that like one singular event could actually bring the planet to being like fully in uninhabitable by the end of the century. You're talking about like multiple different vectors by which this could take place, all of which are outgrowths of the contradictions of the system as well. So like any attempt to really try to overturn that is going to be is almost it's like it's sort of necessitates the changing of the system into something that is actually more sustainable. Because if you once we all analyze the system and we realize that like it's unstable in its core, like it's a feature of the system to kind of be like that, right? Just a basic thing of, oh, you know, we don't have a finite, we're on the planet with finite resources, but the system is predicated on infinite growth, which is why you see this big trend towards expanding beyond the planet and expanding towards becoming an interplanetary species, because we need to, you know, as a backup or as to like mine the asteroid belt, because we need more resources, even though most of the resources that we use today, let's say for instance in rare earth elements, most of that, vast majority of which is not recycled at all, so it's very much wasted, first of all, which kind of just throws in the face the fact that like we are actually just they are actually not interested in, you know, actually solving these problems, because they recognize that like they still in some ways, or they at the very least believe that they will benefit or continue to benefit from from these systems as well. So like, you know, how is it that like transforming or basically like terraforming the planet back into something that's more stable, how is it that like that is going to happen under a system which is actively like fighting against that? So we're constantly in this like uphill battle of trying to reverse those trends. And you know, it was alluded to before, like this will get exponentially harder over time.
Mm.
You know, and one reason for that is because like if at the same time you're trying to maintain hegemony over the system, and you're perpetuating or manufacturing consent for like wars in all these different places, then that will take away time and energy away from staying below, let's say, 2 degrees above like pre-industrial levels. And once we get past that point, we'll actually just get to reach this sort of a pinnacle, or this point, this major point of just
Mm.
realizing that even if we were to just cut off and instantly overnight, with the click of a finger, stop emitting carbon emissions at all, like go to complete zero, total zero, not even like net zero, just total zero, the planet will continue to unravel itself and to continue to collapse, like ecologically speaking, like this. So at that point, and you know, according to people like the IPCC or organizations like the IPCC and so on, like it's a very real possibility that we could get to that point within the next few decades, which, given the span of like all of human history, we're talking about like 0.00 like 1%, like literally the last hour of human civilization, and we're here right now having to like figure out how to unwind all of this stuff. So like, yeah, I generally don't think that like we're gonna make it out of this unless we move towards something else, something more sustainable, which will involve like embracing a lot of indigenous knowledge on the one hand, but then also just applying all of those things to our own like material conditions right now, and just like, you know,
Yeah.
liberating ourselves, moving towards something else, and not prioritizing like what the powers that be are telling us are the solutions, because it's very clear based on the track record that it's just not the case. Like their solutions are not helping us right now. They haven't helped us in the past, and it most certainly will not like help us going forward. So, you know, workers of the world unite. You know what I mean? Like we gotta sort this out.
Exactly.
We're on the clock, right? We're on the clock, everyone. You know?
Mm. I
Yeah.
mean, I can't believe that it's the 21st century already, but
Mm.
people kind of have to tell you like Can white people, white passing, but please get rid of the royal families, please? Well, I thought
Mm.
it would pass feudalism already. Why are you still having them?
Mm.
Oh man.
It's uh, I think we see that, right? Like we see government sitting back talking about we as the population need to reduce our carbon footprint while they're fully allowing these corporations, extraction corporations, to increase their extraction and carbon footprint. Like, you got to be joking me, right? Like, you tell us that you want us to, survive this whole thing, but in the same hand, you're allowing us to be gotten rid of. Like, you got to be joking.
Yeah, it's like it's pretty ridiculous. Like I think I mean just speaking from in Hawaii right now. I mean, this is one place. This is happening all over the United States though, but we're like literally running out of water, like which
Yeah,
without which you
exactly.
have no life, ola ika vai is
Yeah.
water is life, right? And like right now actually, it's kind of like, Saber was kind of saying like we're on the clock and we have to do something. And so right now the Oahu water protectors and other Native Hawaiians and our supporters, we have. I'm not there physically, but I'm like trying to support them as much on the digital front, in the in the struggle. They are currently at DC. They're in Washington DC and New York trying to uh, get the U.S. empire and the military to defuel their Red Hill tanks, the literal headquarters of the global reigning champion of capitalist empire, which is the United States. Its world empire headquarters in Hawaii, where they are spilling to this right now. They're spilling jet fuel into water as we speak.
Yeah.
They've already broken, like, it's just a complete nightmare scenario. It's very similar, like, and then what they're telling us is like, what Sue was saying. They're telling, well, what people in Hawaii just have to use less water, just like take a shorter shower. The U.S.
Gosh.
military has to make
Stop using straws. Stop using straws.
stop using straw. The
Hmm.
U.S. military has to fight a needless war in Taiwan
Yeah.
and start World War III by shooting ICBMs at China. So in order to start World War III, I mean, because you could do climate war, you could be non-nuclear war annihilation. We have to annihilate the world three different ways by storing 250 million gallons, the world's largest. We need to have the Death Star's fuel so we can shoot F-22s at China right now. So can you drink? Can you drink less water? Can you just like drink like battery acid? Can you just like don't
Stop taking shower.
stop taking
Yep.
showers? Don't water anything. Don't just take like wash your dishes with like baby wipes,
And
and
tears.
let the U.S. military dump jet fuel in your water so that we can blow this entire planet up. It's ridiculous.
And the thing, like the thing that like they illegally occupy Hawaii so they can turn you into a military base so they can conquer the
Mm.
rest of the world. It's just disgusting the more you think about it,
Yeah, and I'm just gonna drop. I do this thread often, but some people are going like Silver Spook. Hawaii is a state, and Hawaii was saved by America because they only lived in
Are you proud to be American, Silver Spook? You have American. You are American, and Lostsioux was saying like you won the lottery. You won the lottery to be born in
yeah.
the USA, the best country in the world, and the UK is the second best.
The best country in the world when it comes to number of incarcerated people.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. Number one.
Military expenditure, just
Yeah,
like the list goes
military
on. You know what I mean?
expenditure.
It's like,
Every day I'm waiting for like how many people are going to either like the people are in like denial, but thankfully like even like I mean I think at this point like I don't want to pat myself on the back, but I spent like 4 hours a day in December and January just like putting as much on blast, and like I did get like one of the Red Hill and the Hawaii threads got like 3-5 million views. Actually, I've been reached out to by large East Asian countries. Like I don't want to be called a CCP affiliated government spy, so I can't do certain things.
Where's
But
my C-Bucks?
where's my C-Bucks? I
Where's
heard,
your
I heard.
digital
Oh no,
yuan? Like, you know what I mean?
I need my
Yeah.
Putin and my C-Bucks, man. Come on.
Uh-huh.
But it's like but I mean, at least like because it's become enough of a problem. Even the U.S. Navy admiral said, because like a lot of us were going hard at it. The U.S. Navy admiral said, like internally, like it's like the LinkedIn for the U.S. military. These are like the people they make like multi-million dollars a year. They have a revolving door contract at the Pentagon, then they go work for Raytheon and Northrop Grumman, and they go back to the Pentagon. And the admiral, he said, like in his inside doc, like to the other Navy commander, he said it has been difficult to maintain the military's U.S. military and U.S. national security narrative in the face of alternate narratives. So it has been they've admitted that it's been a problem, and that now they're actually having, like, not to say that the U.S. military is going to defuel it. They're going to fight as much as possible because they need it. The reality is, if they want to wage this hybrid war, right, on all over the Pacific, threatening both Luna, everyone in Korea, I mean, the world, but everyone in the Asia Pacific, which is, again, that's Asia is 60% of the world, and the Pacific is 10. That's like 70% of the Earth is threatened by what they're doing.
Yeah.
And so they said, like, and without the Red Hill, like the aircraft carriers, they don't have enough storage in all of their aircraft carriers and their other alternate facilities to fuel that entire effort. So it really is a sore point, which is why we try to go like so hard. And also because like the people who are going to suffer the most. I mean, we're suffering. Obviously, there's jet fuel coming out of my parents' water right now. Let's be real. It's not good. They're in denial of it, but it's increasing. The plume of fossil fuel is spreading for 1 million people's drinking water. The military families are, at least now, they're suing the U.S. government right now. Camp Lejeune is another place. The U.S. one of countless places the U.S. military is just dumping toxic waste into the water. So if you're thinking of signing up for the military, get ready for your children and your partners to be poisoned, because that's what the military does to not to you, the soldier. You sign your life away, but even if you have children, if you have a wife or a husband or a partner or family members, your children and your family members are in direct harm's way as a military service person. So on top of you're a stormtrooper, you're committing war crimes. But if you don't care about that, think about how, and also 1 out of 4 military families is food insecure. And so anyway, so long story short though, like the struggle is we're trying our best to continue that struggle, and like they're fighting it every step of the way. The military is the Hawaiian. We were in the Oahu Water Protectors were at DC talking to the EPA. At least the EPA has now come out and said that the U.S. military and the Pentagon, the DoD, and the U.S. Navy, the Marines, etc., are in direct violation of EPA standards, because, again, like we're saying, like they don't work for any the billionaire, feudal, capitalist, racist, gold diapers ass clowns that run the West. They don't really work. They don't care about environmental protections, right? Otherwise, they wouldn't tell you use a steel straw while they fund billions of dollars into these horrible corporations. But like, it's because of the pressure that even the Environmental Protection Agency has now been forced to admit this is a problem, and it's only getting worse. And it was a sore point, especially when Taiwan happened, because they're going, we have to liberate the Taiwanese people, from this, right? Because it's anti-democratic. And I was like, well, how about you like liberate Hawaiian people by leaving?
Exactly, like fix your own problem first, fix your own backyard first before you go and point your fingers. And I was like, it doesn't mean that we pro or anti-Taiwan anything. We're talking about the USA has no place, no position whatsoever to point the fingers at anybody, any country in the world.
How about making a fucking amends for all the broken and violated treaties, and fucking honor the treaties?
Exactly.
For once in your fucking slimy existence.
Now they have the nerves. They have the nerves to lecture us.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how are the treaties going in the so-called Canada? I saw the wetlands.
Not little chunks here and there, but that's only for show. For the most part, it's business as usual. Not much has changed. They're still stealing our children, putting them in rapist, pedophile, fucking foster homes, that pay the foster parent at minimum $10,000 a month per child
Mm.
instead of giving, 5 grand to the actual families to per child to uplift them out of poverty and save supposedly Canadian taxpayer dollars when none of it actually comes from taxpayer dollars. Um, they still try and lay claim to our lands. They still have their fucking Indian hunters, the RCMP, still fucking violating treaties and fucking protecting oil corporations and fucking
Mm.
stepping on indigenous lands and trying to kill us off. We still have a shit ton of murdered and missing indigenous women and girls that hasn't stopped. We still have twilight tours of cops taking indigenous men out in the bush in the dead middle of winter and fucking stripping them of their shit, all their clothes, and leaving them out there to fucking freeze to death. We still have all that shit. And once again, yes, our population, our prison population, is the majority of it is indigenous people, our native people, doing longer sentences for the same crime a white person would get and get a slap on the wrist and sent home to mommy and daddy. Yeah. Not much. But hey, we have a radio station now that plays, country music that, talks about truth and reconciliation and being a part of that movement. Uh,
I mean, you should be happy that you're like, accepted being a part of Canada, like usually, you know what? Canada usually being forgotten by the rest of the world because how horrible they are. And they see people usually just, I'm sorry, but you just focus on the US, their neighbor, and then the UK, the literal empire.
Mm.
Because they forget about how evil Canada and Australia are. I mean, yeah,
Mm.
it's so underrated about being how evil you are. Oh, by the way, and it's just a fun story about like there's a official Facebook page of the UK embassy in Vietnam, like literally official with blue check there. It's very important. You know what, Saber? About 2 days ago or something, they in that official Facebook page of the embassy, there's a Facebook post, they saying about how the voting in Luhansk and Donetsk, and how the UK embassy like against it is not democracy. It's blah blah. They wrote it in both Vietnamese and English. And you know what?
Mm.
It just after just a few minutes, they got bombarded by Vietnamese commenters, like by thousands of comments coming from Vietnamese. We just like spam them with Kosovo or
Mm.
Yugoslavia. It means like we fed up, we're tired of their bullshit. Like, it doesn't
Mm.
mean that we like again. It doesn't mean that we pro or anti the vote of Luhansk and Donetsk in Ukraine with Russia thing. It means that like the UK literally now dare to lecture us about freedom and democracy in our own fucking language. Why they literally did it. They did it
Mhm.
several times in the world like hypocrites, and thousands of Vietnamese people bombarded their Facebook page official with blue check because of
Yeah.
to point out how hypocrites they are. I say, yeah, that's the thing.
Right.
At least we see some light of hope in Vietnam. We do not give
Mhm.
a shit about their lives anymore.
I
Mhm.
keep saying this all the time to our pheno skin type deficient relatives. You don't have to be a colonizer. You don't have to be a racist. You can heal and become a relative. Pure and simple. Pure and simple, because what affects all of us is also affecting you. Poverty, being locked up in jail for stupid shit that no one should be locked up for, all of these things. Landlords demanding more rent money, while providing less services. All of these things, groceries costing more for no reason whatsoever other than greed, all of these things.
Mm.
And you really have to ask yourself, if something, it's like, why do you feel or think that you're still like being in slavery is a good thing? Because you're stuck in a slavery mindset without having to have chains and shackles on you. You've been put into that mindset where you don't need chains and shackles anymore to be a slave. You're a slave to your employer. You're a slave to your landlord. You're a slave to the company that's overcharging you and constantly overpricing food and other basic essentials that you need. Where your medical bills, if you go to have a child, you're stuck in life crippling debt just to have a child. Heaven forbid you should get into an accident. Hmm. But yeah, capitalism's going to save you, right? The great almighty wizards that sit up on the hillside in their luxury castles is going to, take the time of day to save you, to bring you back to life. No, they're not. They don't give two fucks about you. If you haven't realized that yet, you need to wake up, smell the coffee, because they don't give two fucks. They could care less. They only want enough. There was talking about the reduction of the population on the planet decades ago. When I was a teenager, I was listening to these fucking people talking about they need to reduce the population because the population on the planet is growing too much.
Yeah, right. Sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Total nonsense. It's a matter of like resources more so than about like space on the planet.
Yeah,
There's enough space
exactly.
for all of us, but it's just this thing whereby like this projection of like, let's say like US consumer standards and applying that to the entire planet almost. It's like, oh, if everyone had to consume as much as the, let's say, in terms of like the US or the UK, even like you need multiple planets to even have enough means to make that happen. But it's just we there's enough space for us. It's just a matter of distribution. Like there's enough food, for instance, to feed everyone on the
Yeah.
planet, but like it's just not being
Most
distributed to everyone who needs it. It's the economic system that actually decides where like things are being sent to, and like I don't know, like to your point, Lostsioux, as well, like just you talking about like, and geez, is it time for the anti-white? I don't know. It's look, so look. It's not necessarily about like, it's not about the skin color, right? It's just about like
Mm,
just the construct that was like created and like manufactured and
mhm.
perpetuated
exactly.
in order to
Oneness is a
separate,
social construct. Yes.
yeah,
That's why
separate this group of people from everyone else. You know what I mean? It's a
that
century
that's
long thing. But
why
yeah, go ahead.
that's why I say how I
Mm,
say it, right? Our phenotype skin type, our pheno skin type deficient relatives,
mm,
and I say the word relatives, not meaning that you're an alien that came from some other fucking planet and you're not related to us at all. We
Yeah.
all bleed red. We all fucking born. We all eating shit. We all fucking die. We're the same. We're only different strains of that DNA, if you will, of the human DNA. We're just different strains, but we're all still human. So you can choose to either continue on thinking that you're holier and mightier than everyone else because the rest of us are all subhuman or not human at all, or you can heal from the fucking garbage lies that have been told to you since the day you started to understand what's going on the fucking planet and become a relative again. Up to you. That's your choice. That's not my choice. That's yours.
mm,
Yours to make. But we're here. That's why you see us. This is why you see this BIPOC panel or POC panel, because we're still standing here saying, as much as some of your relatives, some of the white people have done to harm us, hurt us, and damage us, we're still standing here with our hand out to you saying, yo, come heal, be your relative. You don't have to be like those dickheads and those racist pieces of shit. You don't have to be like them. You can come over here. We're more than willing to accept you as who you are. Come heal. Be a part of the human race, of the human species, with all your benefits, glory, bonuses, and defaults or defects, if you will, however you want to look at it. We're all human beings, learning and growing from the day we're born till the day we die. So let's work on a better world for all of us together, not just one group.
Exactly.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yep.
I
It's
think
a
part of that
symbol like
healing has to
that.
come with
Yeah.
like. Oh, go ahead.
Yes, yeah, say it. I just said that.
Yeah. Okay. I think like part of that healing as well has to do with just having a understanding of like history, how it is that this thing came into into being in the first place, and like I don't know. I think it really in my head, like obviously like that throughout history we have adapted to the point where we can recognize differences between different groups of people, between our in groups or out groups and stuff like that. But like this very specific thing in relation to white people being at the top, everyone else being subordinate, and let's say Africans being at the very, very bottom, talking about, let's say, from during like the height of the slave trade, for instance. This is very like there's a whole like process that this actually like came into being. Like it wasn't really like random. Like, you had like these different nations. Of course, you had like the British, and then you had like, let's say, the Spanish and the French. You had that the Portuguese,
yeah.
and like you had all these different
Spanish
the
too.
Irish as well. Yeah, exactly, right. And like these people weren't considered like white at the time. Like they were just it wasn't really a thing. It wasn't until like, you know, at the time it seemed like, let's say, talking about 15th century onwards, from like, let's say, to give people a ballpark, you're talking about from when Columbus sailed westward, got lost, and ended up sparking this entire catastrophe that we're still living under, this apocalypse that we're dealing with right now. Is that like a lot of that was really thrusted by like just conflicts between various like European nations on the one hand, mainly religious conflicts as well, versus, you know, the sort of like Protestants versus like or like Catholics, for instance, let's say like Spanish and the Portuguese, I believe, versus like, let's say, the Ottomans coming in from the east, pushing themselves like further towards like the west, for instance, and then you have the British as well. So like over time, like as for instance someone like Henry VIII wanted to divorce his wife and stuff, or like allegedly divorce his wife, couldn't really do that under being a Catholic, moved towards like like be like sort of Protestant sect of like Christianity, which I believe was like ushered in under like Martin Luther or something in like the 1500s, I believe, like 1517 or something like that. So that caused like conflicts between the Catholics and the Protestants. So you had these, like within Europe, you had these conflicts, internal conflicts and stuff. But at the same time, you had the Ottomans coming in, which was causing a lot of pressure towards these like Europeans as well. On the other hand, like in Africa, in the so-called New World, with the enslaved Africans and with the indigenous people over there, obviously rebelling against that system as well. And so it was like this moment where it's like there needed to be like something else that had to come into play to sort of unify the Europeans. So it's almost as though like whiteness was kind of just this like pan-European project to bring this group of people together to actually
Made up
like
construct.
yeah, to sort of supersede the fact that they had all of these like different conflicts going on. And so like you had this unifying sort of like white class people there, these Europeans, which propelled them above everyone else against not only the like Ottomans, coming in from the east, but also against like a lot of the rebellions that are going on in the so-called New World, and obviously in various places in Africa as well, whereby you had like a lot of Africans, for instance, and indigenous people in the Turtle Islands, and even sort of lower class Europeans who were allying themselves with the Africans and the indigenous people there because they realized that their position, they weren't really benefiting from the system as well. But then you had the separation where like a lot of those Europeans were being sort of inducted into the sort of concept of whiteness to actually turn against the people that they had a lot of like commonalities with in terms of being oppressed in that way. And so that
Shit,
was
even
like
the
almost like
Irish.
the basis of a lot of that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah, the Irish. Yeah,
Yeah.
the,
The
pretty much like a
Irish,
large part of that. Yeah,
Italians,
yeah, yeah,
Scottish,
yep, yeah, yeah, yeah,
Polish, and all of them all got once they came over to so-called
yeah,
United States,
yeah.
Turtle Island. They came over here. All of a sudden, they all got uplifted to whiteness because they didn't want to have a shit ton of people that
Yeah,
weren't
yeah, because
white.
they start to realize that we're not benefiting from this. So they were actually starting to like rebel even more. And so, but then it's like, oh no, now you can be a part of this class of people over here and like
Yeah.
actually turn against everyone else. And so like that, in addition to, and like obviously in order to maintain that or perpetuate that, it has to seep into the culture on a deep level. Like we are superior to you. Like you're subhuman. Like you can't really justify a system like that over the centuries, over the decades, unless there is this component of it that is like you are actually like beneath us, right? Otherwise, how can you justify enslaving another human being in that way,
Well,
Yeah.
generationally,
then
like
you're
generationally? You know what I mean? So yeah,
then what Saber, what you're getting into there is like blood quantum. So for
yes, yeah,
Jamaican, African, our black relatives, um, it's one drop of black blood and you're black forever. There's no escaping it. Whereas with us indigenous people, what they said was 51% or more, and you're still indigenous. Anything lower than that, you're no longer native. Forget about who you are. And it was the erasure. So one was to maintain and keep someone within slavery for the rest of their life that they could never escape.
mm-hmm.
And the other was genocide erasure, to erase a group of people from existence.
Yes,
And they're still working on that today.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's
And
the
it's wild
same
that
as,
it's still happening. It is very,
yeah.
very wild that it's still happening. And like even like, as we're talking about, like Canada is seen as still a lot of people they're like, oh, I don't know about going to the United States, but Canada. I'm like, like, like
Yeah.
please, like please wake up, guys, come on, like just
I
outlining
gotta
all of
tell
this. It's
you,
like yeah,
it's now there's a new thing going on because the white supremacists in Canada and the colonialists and the capitalists are all freaking out because they realize that the southern parts of Turtle Island, including into deep within to the United States, are either going to be under sea level or become barren dunes of sand that nothing can grow in. So they're realizing that Canada's the sweet spot, and they're like, we can't have, an influx of yeah, we can't have that influx. No, 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 no. And you see it, and it's just like, okay, all right, buddy. So then what do we do then? Can we send you back over down there and we'll take in the people that actually want to be here and like honor and respect us indigenous people, and we can send you down there and you can go live down there? Does that work? Does that work for you? Oh, you think you own land here? Oh, did you buy crown land? Well, you got sold land that the crown doesn't own. They don't hold the title to it. They don't hold the deed. we indigenous people do. That's why it's called Crown Land, because they thought we were too unintelligent to manage our own lands.
My gosh.
Hmm. Hmm. Interesting. There's a lot of different things, like even the Royal Proclamation from, what was it, in 1769, I think, or yeah. I always get the last two numbers of the date wrong. Um, but literally, the Royal Proclamation from the King that stated that the colonies cannot go west of the Appalachian Mountains and must stay there, and that the indigenous people could only bring forth any complaints that they had about the colonies to the crown. They couldn't go to France, they couldn't go to Spain, they couldn't go to Portugal, they couldn't go anywhere else but to the crown. That's actually what your taxation without representation was all about. Because none of those rich ass motherfuckers in the US colonizers ever paid an ounce of taxes to the crown. They forced everyone else under them to. That's what that shit was about. They wanted more. They wanted to be greedy. They wanted it all. And they didn't want to abate and abide by the law that the king had proclaimed or proclamized. I can't remember how you say it properly. They didn't want to abide by that. Interesting. And also, even still to this day, even in the U.S. courts of law, it states treaties are the supreme law of the land. That's treaties with us sovereign indigenous nations. Not treaties made with citizens, because you don't make treaties with citizens. You make treaties with sovereign nations, people who they couldn't conquer. And they had to make agreements with. Just a little tidbit of information for y'all.
Yeah, I was gonna just dovetail from that. If you haven't seen, well, you should watch Reservation Dogs #1. But after you watch Reservation Dogs, which is the best representation of indigenous people in a TV show I've ever seen, you should at least, I mean, there's other shows, but you should check it out, and then also check out Prey, which is a Predator movie. Speaking of science fiction, I'm an indigenous science fiction author, but it's a Prey movie. Prey is a movie where an indigenous and also a British woman warrior, Comanche, beats not only technologically advanced aliens, but also kicks the ass of French colonizers in Turtle Island, which historically did happen. So and that's part of the erasure too, which is that like I was saying, indigenous people's first instinct is not to seek war and violence, and like as Sue was alluding to earlier, and I would reaffirm that and reify that as a Native Hawaiian, that land back and decolonization is about healing the brokenness and the trauma between peoples and between the planet and Earth. But if you push, we have to defend ourselves. And in many indigenous peoples, obviously the Vietnamese, you don't fuck with them. But also the indigenous peoples in Turtle Island, many fought and defeated and fought to a treaty. So the U.S. has never actually, or Canada, or any of the colonizers have actually taken the land. What they do is they just go, well, so we didn't do the quote unquote conquest that we said, but let's just kind of gloss past that treaty because, we just don't feel like it. We just don't feel like honoring. It's kind of like under the United Nations, the sovereign country of Hawaii is technically under the UN High Commissioner on Human Rights has said Hawaii is a illegal military occupation resulting from fraudulent annexation. The United States government has actually been ordered by the UN, right, to immediately remove all military bases, and the sovereign country of Hawaii's government and laws must be respected, right? And the U.S. goes, we just don't feel like doing that now. right? You can actually in Hawaii, if you get a traffic ticket or a parking offense, or you get a fine, and I have like relatives who've done this, you can go and say, I don't owe $100 for this speeding ticket or this license plate ticket for a Kingdom of Hawaii license plate. The United States government owes me $64,000, and you can only pay it in gold bars because the U.S. dollar is not currency in the sovereign country of Hawaii, and the courts will actually forgive the ticket because they have no argument, actually, in the actual legal system. So the solution is literally, the colonized solution is just to NDA, pay people off, beat you up, get you to shut up, and which also, because they have no legitimacy. The United States, literally, when you say so-called Canada, so-called U.S., and even more, it's the thinness of their veiling of their criminality in Hawaii is extremely thin, right? And I pointed this out in a recent thread that I made about land back, and I said, like, what's the difference between Hawaii, Vietnam, and Bolivia, right? Or the United States, right? Vietnam is 98% indigenous. Well, I mean, I can't. Luna should speak about that, but they are. Vietnam and China as well. They have never had more than less than 10% of the population be occupying as Euro colonizers. Well, Japan, China is different, but in Bolivia, they are still 60% indigenous identifying or indigenous affiliated. There's several different peoples, right? There's actually multiple nations within a nation, which is it's kind of a roadmap because they've had more success. Like the Bolivian Socialist MAS, the indigenous-led socialist party, has thrown off 3 coup attempts. One of them backed directly by Elon Musk. He admitted it, said, we will coup whoever we want. Well, when he said, you know what, Bolivia didn't need you and the United States military and intelligence community over, and he said, we will coup whoever we want, straight to the Bolivian people. And they kicked anyway. So the point is their struggle is a little different than struggles in Asia, and the difficulty of the United States, right, which is the United States, an important factor people have to remember, and similar to Canada, is the U.S. is the world's largest European settler colony, 250 million people. It's actually, the U.S. is 5 times bigger than any other white country, right? Because Germany, Britain, it outnumbers them massively. In economic power, it outnumbers them massively, which explains a lot. It's the capitalist superpower, it's the white supremacist superpower, it's the imperialist superpower, and that makes it difficult when large numbers of the people are like, why am I going to change this system? Even though the system's hurting everybody, including white people in the United States. But in the long, anyway, so I'll let Luna speak because I want to let Luna comment on that. But what I think in Hawaii, we're a little bit closer to something like, we're not quite at the consciousness level of the Hawaiian national consciousness, and the Hawaiian anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist consciousness is not at the level where it is in a place like certain South American countries. But those countries have turned very recently. Bolivia was one of the poorest places, huge oppression, right-wing military, and neoliberal-led governments just sucking the resources out. It was where Spain enslaved the people and threw them into mines to get the silver to put to China in the opium wars. Anyways, so Bolivia has a horrible history, but they've changed in 20 years in a direction that Bolivians didn't say like, oh, you know what, all the white people have to just go back to Europe, right? It's like if you can coexist as another nation, you have to respect that we have different languages. We have Quechua, we have Aymara architecture, we have Quechua clothing, we have Grawani language, and you have to respect all the different languages inside of this state in the Westphalian sense. And if you can do that, right? If you don't be a freaking Nazi and take money from the CIA and the NED and try to overthrow us, if you don't do that, then you don't have to go back to Germany or Britain. But you have to respect that we have different, as what everybody's saying, we have differences here, right? We have different skin color, we have different history, a different language. You have to allow us to be different. You can't expect us to all be monocultural white people with you at the top, or you have to let us be equal and different inside of this country. And if you can do that, then that's because it's kind of like an example of a place that the U.S. or Canada could get to over time with education and economic and social change. But because anyways, I said a lot of things, so unless Luna, you jump in.
I want to, Luna, if it's okay with you, I want to address some things
Sure.
that were stated. So first things first, George Washington still had slaves and was all about slavery. And then the same factor when he came and was talking about creating in agreements or wanting to create agreements with us indigenous people, that was
Mm.
because they knew they couldn't beat us in a fair fucking fight. So they
Yeah.
wanted to have fucking agreements, and then knowing full well that they would change that or backtrack on that or violate it immediately as soon as it was signed and agreed. Um, as soon as the Chiefs put their fucking finger and touched the pen, it was there.
Yeah. They're very famous for that.
Secondly, I'm sorry, Silver Spook. I love you, Cola, but I do not appreciate pray the way that some people do. Because
Mm.
first things first, no man would ever go out of his way in those day and ages to hit a woman or a two-spirited person. And that show also leans towards white feminism and forgets and completely tries to annihilate the existence of two-spirited people within our way of life in those day and ages. The other thing was French were too fucking lazy. They didn't go out of their way to move away from any of the fucking forts. They made sure us native people brought in all the furs. They were too fucking lazy to go out and get it. So there is some things that I don't exactly agree with, and I think it's great in the factor that it is moving forward comparatively to like the old spaghetti westerns that we used to watch about us and indigenous people. It's moving forward, yes. So like I give it like a 7 out of 10. But there's still a lot of inconsistencies and wrong things about it. Do you know what I mean? Like they're still not quite they're not quite correct on getting us correct.
Yeah, no, I definitely. It definitely is not. It's not a perfect show that's got everything right. You're 100% right about that. Yeah.
Secondly, where's the other one? Kalala. White people are allowed to stay in return land. And yes, we do promise we're not being butthurt. And we're not going to do what was done to us to you. We'll make sure that you're well looked after. And that you have everything that you need, including housing, food, and clothing and whatnot, medical attention and whatnot. We'll make sure of that. With treaties in Canada being signed with the Crown, how to move away from the monarchy while respecting treaties.
Mm.
That's always going to be a tough one.
Exactly.
Like it's like some of that is above my pay grade in that aspect because I don't know everything. I'm still learning just like everyone else here. But from what I understand, some treaties will either have to be honored and re-implemented, and some treaties would have to be re-looked at, revised, and re-signed.
Yeah.
And so the last round was supposed to be an equal, and they completely screwed that up and backed out on that one to where it's not equal. So like I said, there's a lot of different things that have to go through that. And it's not even just not just only white people. Everyone that's in North America, so-called North America, Turtle Island, we're not telling you to get the fuck out. Land back happens, we're not kicking you out. We're not. The only questions is can you handle living in a society that isn't capitalist based and all about fucking punishment and harming every single person that you see? Or can you, manage to live in a good way, in a healthy way? If you have an issue with that, well, then we may have to look at what we're going to do. And that's just not us indigenous people making that decision. That would be like a whole group of like all different groups of people sitting back going, okay, what are we going to do with this person? They can't fit in here. They're constantly attacking people. They're constantly doing things that isn't a benefit for this world, this community. What are we going to do? Can we try different things? Sure. But you know what I mean? Like there's a whole conversation piece that comes in there. But I guarantee you, every single indigenous elders and leaders and communities have all talked about we're not interested in kicking you out. We're interested in keeping the arrangements and agreements that our ancestors made with you all to share this land equally with you all.
Exactly.
Um,
I mean, that's why I don't trust anybody who said that they against land back.
yeah.
It's either like they white supremacists or they like just look down on us and they don't even listen to us about what we meant when we said land back, and they just like straight up they're afraid that they will be treated the way they treated us for hundreds of years, thousands of years. So I mean, yeah, I don't trust anybody who said that they don't support land back. That's really bullshit because like they still have the mindset of like the settler mindset means that like, well, if we take the land back, we will kick them out just like what they did to us, or like we will enslave them just like what they did to black people. Like, no, we don't. We're not as barbaric as you. Yeah, that's like Lostsioux just said, like all we want is to share this earth, to take care of this earth together. And the thing too is that like, Vietnam is the decolonization and land back is not just a story that only on paper. Vietnam did it twice. We did it literally
Mhm.
twice. One in the first time was in 1954 when we fought against the French colonialists, and then in 1975 when we kicked out the American invaders. And is now Vietnam a national state? No, we're not. We still welcome foreigners, to
Shit,
go
your
and live in
partner
Vietnam
in
here.
crime, EJ, is not a Vietnamese, and he lives
Yeah,
there
like
fine.
exactly. He lives here fine, and he doesn't come here to become a colonizer or a settler. He doesn't come here to enslave our people. He comes here so he can enjoy our culture, and our people and our history and learn about history. And he has to follow our laws. And if we break and if he's like disrespectful to our people, our history, our tradition, our law, he will be kicked out of the country because like we run this country. And the other, settlers mindset people, they don't understand that. I just, I'm very sad and
Saturn,
very mad at those people.
Saturn, Saturn, Sam. I know you're kidding on it, but when we're looking at like, okay, so if somebody is beyond hope and is constantly murdering women, children, people of color, constantly raping, there may be some things that we might have to look at in that
Mm,
regards. If they
mm,
cannot change, if they cannot heal, if they cannot better themselves and stop committing those acts, right? Those are the
yeah.
things we look at when we talk about that. Well, there may be some situations that we may have to look at more deeply than just don't worry, you're not being kicked out. And yeah, if majority though, if a white person leaves after land back, that's on their own volition. That's not us forcing them to leave.
Yeah,
They make
exactly.
that choice
Yeah.
out of their own free will, if you will.
Yeah, I want to ask Saber a little bit because I mostly, like mostly just heard news about, the US, but the UK, I want to ask you, like the actual life is over there, especially, the experience of a black person in the
Hmm.
empire. Yeah, yeah, I want to know about that.
Oh, where to begin? So, actually, it's interesting because depending on where your background is, somewhat determines your actual experience being here. Like for instance, someone who's, let's say, first or second generation from the African continent, they have
Mm,
a slightly different experience from someone who's has, like, let's say, Jamaican descent, for instance. Um,
Mm.
and it's interesting parallels to sort of see commonalities as well as like certain differences as well. Um, because I live in London, right? So I live in London, in the capital city of the whole UK, and I tend to find that, like, prior to really getting an understanding of like the political or economic system that we live under today, as well as like how we ended up here, there is this impression that it's almost this kind of like hyper individualistic,
mm,
very like liberal perception that like where we are right now, despite some injustices,
mm,
has no bearing on like what we can do now going forward. So, for instance, you could have someone who, even some, let's say a fellow African, for instance, or let's say Jamaican person, fellow Black person in general, who would obviously recognize some of the injustices that we faced historically,
mm,
but would sort of presume that, like, uh, let's say, for instance, me articulating the history, for instance, over the past few centuries, would sort of take that as, let's say, victimizing ourselves, or like using that as an excuse to not actually improve things, or to improve our own lives or our own situations. And so it's this weird dynamic whereby like there is this somewhat historical recognition of what's happened to our people, but there is this sort of disconnect between like how that materially connects to like where we are today. So for instance, I'll give an example. So like everyone instinctively knows that if one was to be born in generational wealth,
mm,
can very easily recognize that like the child who's born from the parents that are like incredibly rich most
mm,
likely gonna have an easier life, access to more stuff, whether it's like
mm,
more food, more resources, better education, private healthcare,
Mm.
um, stuff like that, or access to people that are also in a similar class that can open up opportunities to them that otherwise would not have been allowed to someone in a lower class, for instance. So can very easily make that connection between generational wealth and the likelihood that the child being brought up in that situation will be in a better circumstance than someone who doesn't have that wealth. However, on the other hand, when you talk about generational poverty, on the other hand, there's this
mm,
immediate disconnect between that and the opportunities that we have living here today. So even though where we are right now is not as overt as actual like overt enslavement, like we were talking briefly earlier about like
mm, mm.
the forms of almost the forms of incarceration that we have to deal with today are very like
Mm,
invisible today. We can't really
mm,
see them as explicitly as we were if we were to literally have like shackles on our arms and on our legs.
mm,
But there's still a lot of historical things that have led up to where we are right now, and as a consequence, setting the foundations for like what we can actually do going forward in the
yeah,
future. For instance, like
yeah.
I being from, let's say, East Africa and West Africa, for instance, mom and dad's side, the underdevelopment of those places didn't just happen out of nowhere. Happened as a consequence of colonialism over the past few centuries, which is like intrinsically linked with the development of the, let's say, the Western world, so like the UK and the US. So the development that we see here could not have happened unless the underdevelopment of the global south took place. It's like the extraction of resources, extraction of labor, knowledge,
Mm,
philosophy, art, culture, people, all of that basically set the foundations for where we are right now. And so you can see this centuries of wealth building, and the wealth being like invested into other things, uh that can continue to develop a certain group of people versus like disempowering or disenfranchising another group of people. So we find ourselves in this position right now where like we're here in London, we're here like let's say in the UK, and there is seemingly all these opportunities afforded to us here, and a decent number of us can actually go ahead and take those opportunities. You know what I mean? But you can still see some very heinous disparities in terms of the, if you take a statistical approach. So you'd still see like disproportionate, let's say, stop and searches, or in America, I suppose that'd be like stop and frisk, or like just like disproportionate sentencing for the same crimes, like increased likelihood of you being brutalized by the police or being murdered in custody in the police, increased likelihood of you being expelled or excluded from school for the same thing as, let's say, your like white counterpart, for instance. These things still play out on a structural level, despite the fact that you're hearing all these things about how progressive this place is, how many opportunities are being afforded to us as black people in the UK, as much as you see these billboards from Hugo Boss, or like from I don't know, I want to give a specific example, but like all these big brands trying to advocate for inclusion on the one hand, putting all these models and stuff like that on the front of the billboard, but then internally a lot of them discrimination being taking place within the organization itself. And so there's this massive contradiction between the two. And I tend to find that like if you are fully if you have been fully indoctrinated into the sort of liberal hyper sort of neoliberal sort of system that we live under today, it's like it's very easy to buy into that because of what you see, because of all the like marketing, basically, as I like to put it. It's marketing. There's so much money and resources being put into figuring out exactly how to like convince you of something. It isn't just a newspaper anymore. Like there's algorithms now that you can actually just like, okay, what does this person think? How can we actually change your mind into believing a certain thing? Right? The idea that this is not being applied to our political or economic systems is just absurd. It's just like, okay, this is what you should believe about how the system works. This is how many, you have to think about like, and it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like people continue to try to like perpetuate this thing about how progressive the system is, but like in perpetuating that system is ultimately undermining the inclusive nature of like what they're actually trying to get at. Like it's this very insidious sort of like or Ouroboros snake, that snake that's like eating itself. It's like a thing, and and over time, as as we were talking about earlier, it's like we don't really have an unlimited amount of time to just let this play itself out. At some point, this stuff is just going to come to a head, or it very much is coming to a head in the UK with this cost of living crisis, which I would say for us, by and large, have been living under a cost of living crisis for years, decades, since we got here. But it isn't until it reaches a certain demographic of people that it becomes a national crisis, right? It's like, a natural. But like so what happened when we came over here as like the Windrush generation back in the 50s? So many of us came over to rebuild the UK after World War II, after the country was decimated, coming over and rebuilding the country, still having to face all this discrimination and stuff, only to find out like as late as like a few years ago, let's say 2018, 2019, you have all these people that, after putting in all that time and effort into rebuilding the country, are now being deported back to Jamaica. Because certain documents weren't found to prove that they were eligible to be in the UK after all this time.
Right.
So what's happening?
That sounds like to me. Sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
I was just gonna say that sounds like to me that they didn't want to flip out the bill that they owed in a debt for all that service and hard work.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And it's like this weird contradiction. Like if you were a genuine, like, let's say, leftist living in the UK, it's very like difficult because you know what's happening. You know what this conversation right now we're having, this conversation that we're having about what's going on in the UK, what's going on in the world. But it's almost as though like people here, like let's say people are fully in line, lockstep with the system, are almost like living in a sort of augmented reality. Like they have sort of XR glasses on there, so they can see things, but like
Mm.
the interpretation of it is completely like upside down. And it's especially hard to talk to like fellow, let's say, Africans, fellow Black people, because they recognize some of the contradictions as well on a more visceral level, because they can reflect on their own family struggles. Why is it they're here in the first place as well? But it's just this constant reinterpretation that like that has no bearing on like what we can do going forward.
Yeah.
Which it boggles my
Sad.
mind to some degree.
Yeah.
Like it isn't the case that like recognizing that prevents you from actually charting a course forward towards liberating yourself.
Exactly.
It's just about like having that information and being able to actually chart a path forward that would actually make a material impact, not only on yourself individually, but as a collective. Because it may be the case that like you're disregarding that, or you're sort of like not sort of thinking about what happened in your past, and you're sort of thinking, okay, I'm just gonna grind my way to success, to win in the system. And a very small percentage of people end up getting to that point, whether they're actors or athletes or have a lucky shot in a business, rise their way throughout the ranks or become CEOs and stuff like that. A very small percentage of us do end up getting into those positions, but it ultimately won't amount to much if it isn't coupled with the uplifting of all of us in general, because as we've spoken about, the sustainability of the planet is not going to happen unless the entire system changes. So you may get to that point, and you may be living easy for the next couple of years, in your living life, living a large luxury lifestyle. But what happens in a decade or two when you can't really, when it's not really where are you gonna go? Are you gonna go to Mars? If Elon has his way and he's able to build some kind of self-sustaining thing on Mars to help you escape, or some kind of bunker, or some kind of like seastead that Peter Thiel wants to like set out to kind of escape from the worst of climate change and stuff like that, right? Or are you gonna still be here in this environment where you have millions of people trying to get what you have, because they have nothing, because let's say the rest of the planet is almost like uninhabitable by that point, so they're obviously going to try to get what you get anyway. So like either way, you may have a small percentage of people that are able to sustain themselves, but the vast majority are not going to be able to. So it's even in their best interest to move towards a system that uplifts everyone. It shows that everyone has the best needs met, like the bare minimum, like food, shelter, housing, internet, like this day and age, you know what I mean? Like water, fresh water, as Spook was saying, like these things are very, very important. Doesn't matter how wealthy you are, if it gets to a point where like you can't really have those things for everyone, it's only a matter of time before like people reach a point of scarcity to where like they would want to like find that anyways. And it's not like a sort of immoral thing. It's like people need to be able to survive, right? Like it's the fault of the economic system and the political systems that we have at play that are just failing to deal with the fact that like this is a very real circumstance, right? It's a very real situation that we're dealing with in terms of like maintaining the planet, like as a whole, with the billions of people that are on this planet right now and all this kind of stuff. So like, yeah, I mean, to kind of like draw it all back to your question, I feel like the next few years in the UK are going to be very pivotal when it comes to like setting the course for the next few decades at least, if not like a century, because we're already seeing like the waves, or seeing the fallout from not being able to access certain resources, or like dealing with inflation because we can't meet our own energy needs because of something that happened elsewhere, or not being able to provide for ourselves energy wise, food wise, like healthcare wise, stuff like that, like, and and that's only like right now, like it may be the case that like so for instance in the UK, like there's a few, let's say tens of thousands of people, maybe a few hundreds of thousands of people trying to like come into the country every year because they're escaping situations that they can't sustain themselves in the elsewhere in the world. Imagine that like 100 times greater, 100 times like more people trying to come in because where they're at is literally uninhabitable.
Yeah.
So you see all these reactionary people talking about anti-immigration and all of this. What's gonna happen when like there's 100 times more people trying to come in through Calais in France, trying to come in
Mm.
through all the way to the UK? What are you gonna do? How are you going to be able to sustain yourself if
Yeah.
that stuff isn't resolved, right? So it's in everyone's
Yeah.
best interest to make that happen. But there's this sort of delusion almost where it's like we can just continue business as usual. We can continue to maintain the system while still, I don't know, like it's best case scenario in terms of climate, for instance, is this whole idea of like net zero by 2050, right? And
Yeah.
that in of itself should raise alarm bells because the top scientists in the world are saying that by that point we may already be past the tipping point.
Exactly. In the next 10 years, it's
Yeah,
gonna be real bad.
exactly. So that's the thing. Like we have to like do some kind of radical shift. Otherwise, there we go. We're gonna get to
Yeah.
that point and we're gonna realize that like, yeah, I mean, trying to be an eternal optimist as much as I can, of course.
Yeah.
But
Same. Yeah.
like, I mean, at some point you got to be realistic. It's like, okay, someone has a gun like pointing towards your head and they shoot a bullet. It's like, okay, you may have a few milliseconds, but it's like at a certain point you realize, let's say you were to slow down time from the time that bullet coming towards your head, you're like, oh, okay, that bullet's coming. I physically don't have enough time to move out of the way, but it's coming. But like, what? You know what I mean? It's like it's coming closer. At some point, we have
Yeah.
to realize that like we actually don't have time. Like we actually don't
Yeah.
have
We literally
time.
have a less than 10
So
years to fix everything. Or everything after that is gonna be.
yes, it will just be like more and more exponential. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, like I suppose the last thing I'd say is that like it has been sort of difficult, I'd say, to like have that optimism in here because like
Yeah.
most people that I talk to are just like fully entrenched in the system, whether they're sort of on the
In
more liberal side
doomerism.
or on the
Yeah.
more on the more sort of
Yeah.
like conservative side as well. Like both sides, like even the people that are considered to be the progressives in the mainstream still don't understand the gravity of the situation, still don't understand the necessity to like change the system on a radical level. But I mean, in the past, let's say a few months or so, and I suppose this would be somewhat advice for those who are maybe living here in the UK or something like that, is that like I suppose organizing is also something that is quite effective
Yeah.
in terms of just being like, oh, okay, I'm not the only person that's like looking at the situation, being like, oh, what are we gonna do? Like, what action can we actually take to try to overturn this thing? Like, so getting organized, trying to raise class consciousness, all that kind of stuff. Like political consciousness too. Just really trying to like create a sense of urgency and not to be dissuaded by people calling you an alarmist. Because honestly, if you're not alarmed right now by what's going on, let's say with climate change,
Yeah.
with all these like the continued war that's going on, the sort of manufacturing consent of war, constantly continued climate catastrophes, continued pandemic. If you're not alarmed by any of these, I don't know if I want to be around you. Like, I'll be honest. Like, if you're not alarmed at least by one of these things, please just
Yeah,
like
exactly. I
you
mean,
know,
here's the thing. Have you
yeah.
heard of, the new like empath talk with the MAGA communism thing? They literally have a slogan to fight against green fascism. It's actually like
Mm,
literally like kind of denying. It's a bit more complicated than that, but they kind of denying, the climate change, and also they want more industrialization and more, develop in things like that, and then just like, yeah, it's a mixed bag. But I mean, it's
mm-hmm,
really dangerous, to like this is to this day we have less than 10 years to fix everything, but there are still people literally like, I'm sorry, a bunch of them like have a settler mindset and they run around and have that slogan to fight against green fascism. Like, what the heck are you
mm,
talking about? By the way, I have two good news to inform now. Thank you so much, first, Matthias, for your super chat. Thank you so much about oh, I'm sorry, it's 30 minutes ago. The second news is that we got rated by, I think it's Famous Horse. Am I right? Am I
No,
right, people? Because I saw a
$27.
bunch of bus
$27.
emoji.
$27. It's David, $27.
I saw a bunch of horse emoji. I just guess it's a famous horse raid, but I could be wrong. But welcome, Raiders. Welcome, Raider. Yeah. We are talking about this is a panel of indigenous and POC, and we're talking about decolonization and what's going on in the U.S. and the U.K. and Canada too, with Lostsioux, our reporter here. But welcome everybody, and we are talking about the land back and also the life of people of color in the UK, literally in the belly of the beast. Is I mean, I
Literally.
have another question for you too, Saber, because
Yeah.
the thing about in Europe, lots of countries in Europe facing a very tough winter right
Mm.
now because of the thing with Russia thing and Ukraine thing. How is it going to affect the UK and the people over there?
Not great. Not great,
Mm,
unfortunately. Um,
mm,
yeah, so like the biggest thing that's ushering in this recent cost of living crisis, right, is let's say increasing inflation, for instance. So price of all kinds of commodities going up,
yeah.
which has been the case for a little while. But coupling with like the pre-existing issues that I said, it's just making it exponentially worse. But what's sparking this recent one is obviously just the fact that like oil prices are going up, or like energy prices in general are going up, which
Yeah.
is number one,
Gas.
not
Yeah.
only affecting, yeah, it's not only affecting sort of one's ability to heat their own home, sure to be like, or to sort of like cook, for instance, stuff like that. It'll be way more
Mm,
expensive to provide, let's say, electricity to the house, like gas and electric and stuff like that. But also number two would be the ability to, let's say, like travel around, because obviously that requires some amount of fuel costs as well, which is already like increasing exponentially, which is absolutely wild. Then of course you have increasing like food costs as well, because you know a lot of the food that's being that a lot of food that we need to sustain ourselves comes from elsewhere on the planet, which requires a certain amount of fuel to bring it in here. And so if it is the case that like that the prices of that fuel
yeah.
has increased, that sort of gets offloaded
And poor
onto,
people are going to suffer the most.
exactly.
Absolutely.
And it's already the case. You're seeing like people that are suffering like increase like exponentially like more so. And so so I'd say from start of the year until now, like energy costs have gone up significantly, like significantly, worse than anything that we've seen in the past like few decades at least, in terms of like wages, or like real wages as adjusted by inflation versus the amount that actually costs to sustain yourself, or to sustain like most people, the average person. um which was like bad enough as it is earlier on in the year. And even in that sense, we were seeing like temperatures that people were really suffering with on the upside, in terms of it being too hot. People really suffering about like, oh, it's too hot, there isn't enough air conditioning, it's like, how are we going to deal with this temperature, blah blah blah. But like now, going into winter,
Yeah,
not
exactly.
only are we going to see increased inflation still,
Mhm.
which is projected to go even beyond 10% for the year, but you're also seeing the fact that people are going to be spending more on energy to heat their homes or to keep themselves warm throughout the winter as well.
Exactly.
And we're
Yeah.
already starting to see a slight change in terms of temperature here, because it is getting to the point where it's becoming more and more like colder,
Yeah.
through
Winter
during the
is
day and
literally
more in the evening.
coming.
Winter is coming, literally. Winter is coming. Yeah, as a wise Ned Stark has said many a time. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so it's so it's gonna be. Unfortunately, I do think it's gonna be a very 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 long, very very hard winter. I think it is, because people are already suffering as it is, and like
Yeah.
it's gonna get even worse in that sense. And the policies that are put in place to actually help people are insufficient. I'd say that much, because
Mm,
like, number one, it's being framed as like, where let's say if I were to hypothetically be a conservative MP, their argument is that we are trying to give this sort of cost of living package, let's say a certain amount of
mm,
money, to help you ease your load considering all these increasing prices, right? Problem with that frame is that like it is the case that most of the issues are being have come about as a consequence of these conservative policies, for instance, over the past decade. So they're framing it as, let's say, this war on Ukraine, this war on Russia is something that we were unable to avoid. This is causing all of the inflation, and but we're giving you this cost of living package to try to ease the load. The reality of the situation is that as a consequence of like tax cuts for the wealthiest people and like a weakening welfare state and all these other things has led to a slow decline in terms of living standards in the UK, which has made it that much more harder to deal with larger issues like COVID-19 and let's say
Don't
the
forget
war
that
in
the COVID's
Ukraine.
still happening. COVID's still
Exactly.
going
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. 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 Exactly. Yeah. Not to even mention that like those things in and of themselves have been
Yeah.
perpetuated, or like fuel has been added to the fire by those same people who are
I
allegedly trying to give us support to ease the load. Like for instance, like with this whole war situation with Russia and Ukraine, it's like, are you really trying to tell me that like the West, like outside, like the sort of NATO had no influence on adding fuel to the fire in terms of making this thing perpetuate, and now we're in the situation, and now we're having to deal with the fallout from all of these increasing energy prices because we're no longer getting this, because it's like there's disruptions there, there's stuff like that, and so it's a failure of accountability on the one hand, very insufficient. Like it would have been something at least if this sort of cost of living package would actually, was provided enough to actually help people get by, but it's so insufficient. Like it doesn't even cover number one the amount that they have that the average person has lost in terms of the bad policies over the past decade, number one, and number two, it doesn't even factor in the fact that like energy bills are going to continue to go up as a consequence of number one, inflation, and as number two, because of we're going into winter. So it doesn't. It's almost like a. It's almost like a
So they
measure
give
to
you
actually,
money to try to cover up, right? They give you little money, right?
It was a very
It
superficial.
sounds like the UBI
concession.
thing in the USA.
Yeah.
The universal
worse.
basic income thing.
Worse. I'd say it's worse because like.
Wow. Okay.
At a time where people were really getting the sort of getting more and more agitated. Let's say more and more agitated to actually try to make change in the system. People were getting more agitated, going out into the streets a bit more and stuff. They throw this cost of living package on as a sort of concession to get people to like go back home or to like not revolt against the system, and it was effective. That's the biggest thing that like really.
Crumbs, they gave you some crumbs
and people
stop fighting.
They just go back inside. Yeah, exactly. They really stopped, and so they and a lot of those benefits haven't even come into play yet to this day. They just announced it, and that was enough to get people to not try to revolt as much as they probably would have done by now if they didn't announce this cost of living package and stuff. So it's very insidious that they're able to go ahead and just suggest that they're going to help us with these things, and that is enough to get people to be like, all right, okay, let me just
I
mean, one thing I want to say about how London, as well, the U.S. has recently overtaken their dark parent that gave birth to the Anglo-Saxon settler colony empire. But London is when in the colonial era, right, for 500 years, they've been sucking $450 trillion is what has been taken over the last few centuries, approximately from the global south to the global north and the global east to the west. And like they've taken a lot of that money. They have like infinite amounts, not infinite, but huge amounts of resources and money. And they have spent centuries with millions of people spending their entire lives as a professional managerial class. But even the priests and the speechwriters and the universities that have been complicit in colonialism and maintaining the system, they have like huge amounts of resources that, like as you said, Saber, to be the VR glasses, or I think I was thinking of John Carpenter's They Live, where you put the glasses on and it's actually telling you consume neoliberalism good, and it's like it's the double speak, right? Which is Orwell describing London, but saying that communism at the East is bad, and that's where dystopianism happens. But anyway, he was literally a CIA asset. But my point, it's like it's really, I mean, it is hard. When I was in Oahu and Honolulu, which is like, it's like Honolulu actually statistically, Oahu, Hawaii is the most economically unequal place in the one of the most grossly unequal places, is the most unequal place in the U.S. by magnitudes, worse than DC, Los Angeles, Oakland, Honolulu, where I'm from. In the poorest area code in the United States is actually in Hawaii. So, but the quality of the propaganda, right? Who thinks that? You're like, well, that's where pina coladas and white sand beaches are, right? But when I was living in Honolulu, right, it's like being in like the quality of the more money and power that has been sucked into your little imperial headquarters, like Honolulu, London, even Tokyo to an extent, Vancouver, New York City, Miami, Los Angeles. The more money and power that has been sucked into over the period of time, the more sophisticated the propaganda, the mass disinformation that maintains the mass violence and the mass plunder that cycle themselves into each other. And so Honolulu, it's like people like my own family members, they don't even believe they're Hawaiian. My parents, really sad. It's like successful genocide. My parents believe they're slightly too dark Christian Americans. That's what they think that they are. It's taken like all of my time and energy that I possibly could muster trying to survive the most economically unequal place while working as an underpaid social worker and eating spoonfuls of peanut butter and living in a Mazda tribute, literally starving to death with my family, to even figure out that I'm Native Hawaiian. Again, I thought I was just another American, temporarily embarrassed millionaire or temporary embarrassed potential partner of a monarch, temporary embarrassed princess, right? Like Disney princess. It's like the fact that the number one entertainment and corporation, which is mass propaganda corporation in the West, the Disney Corporation, is literally premised upon pumping out movies where you aspire to be a princess. Shows you how not far the progress has moved from feudalism, right? It's Disney. Anyways, so it's like, this is my point of near feud. It's like there's a show called My Pony Princess, Feudalism is Magic, where everybody just mask off, go, we just all want to be princesses, even in America. And so in Hawaii, everybody just wants to be, the head of they all want to join the military. They want to go shoot missiles in Afghanistan for $300,000 a year, sitting around quoting C#, right? And programming drones that are going to go target all the journalists and climate activists and kill them all before we can change anything. For the U.S. military that is literally planning for catastrophic, a slow dismantling of civilization if you want to have a real nightmare, play Battlefield 2042. It's basically like we're going to rule over the ashes of what used to be and what could have been a win-win cooperative healed civilization. We're just going to like cause mass conflict all around Russia and China in the Arctic. Sweden is our new Nazi NATO that's going to punch across the Arctic with AI swarming warfare and very tactical nukes. We're gonna get control of this. My family members are literally Native Hawaiians who work for the military, write propaganda and program drones to practice for climate. The certainty in the billionaire / feudalist / racist / colonial mind, which is that read Douglas Rushkoff's Survival of the Richest, where he literally says they already know. They just assume that everything's fucked, and they're just like, how are we going? Or should we put control mechanisms in our hearts so that if anybody tries to kill us, all the food explodes? Or should we program artificial intelligence? Is like literally like what I feel bad sometimes when I write cyberpunk, because I feel like they're just like taking my games and then using them as blueprints for their dystopias. So I try to make it difficult. It's like, here, you have to make a floating palace, right? And the thing is, you can't levitate, a city the size of Manhattan off the ground. So I want them to waste resources trying to levitate palaces off the ground while we figure out how the fuck to stop it. Like, they're like, wait, what if we have we take all the power from all the U.S. and we put it into an electromagnet? Can we levitate like in Silver Spook's games? And then, because they're idiots. Elon is a clown. He thought that COVID-19, I thought that COVID would be done in 2020. So these guys are actually not worth the gold diaper, they were born in, which is, it's actually really, Elon Musk was an emerald diapered baby. But anyways, I'm way off my target. But what I want to say was that these people are so freaking spoiled, and unfortunately, they have diseducated a lot of people inside of their countries. There are a lot of people outside their countries, actually more people outside their countries in the global south that know what's actually happening, like not just in Vietnam, but lots of other places that I can't name them all right now, but that in Africa as well, and in South America, all Africa, the Americas, the Pacific, and Asia. Asia alone, as I said, 60% of the world's population, that gets written off with in Harry Potter, which is a turf book, but it's like there's one Asian wizard. There should be 2/3 of all the wizards should be Asian if we have if there's equality. But no, it's like you're like most of the planet, right? Asia and the Pacific together is like 70% of the planet. But anyway, the point is that like those people are we are as the global non-West, non-North are like coming out from colonization, and so it is unfortunate that Europe has stupidly decided. Well, if you're I guess if you're a rich billionaire, you're going like, well, we'll continue capitalism by throwing all of our money and javelin missiles into Nazi Ado and into Ukraine for for what, right? So we can all freeze to death. It's really not smart from the perspective of just generally Europeans. It's like and really the global North, which you're not isolating Russia and China. You're isolating yourself off from the rest of the rest of the 90% of the planet that isn't white, that isn't a Euro colonial capitalist project. That's Asia, Africa, the BRICS, right? India surpassed the UK, right, in economy. China only for 1 century, China was the #1 economy in the world, and only for 1 century did the UK and the United States surpass it. China has already, in purchasing power parity, long surpassed the US and the UK. Everybody's just living in denial over there, and so it's like, and it's like I think that one thing that can help people just to kind of like, what is the point of this? Is that like if you, and that's why I hope to do more of these panels, and we try to do more, listen to more, not just people of color voices. You should listen to people of color voices in your own country, right, to understand why did Black Lives Matter happen. If you're a white person in America, you should have got that. I see there's a lot of loss of energy towards fighting racism now. Everybody's, but you have to listen to the people of color and colonized and indigenous peoples and marginalized peoples in your country. But you have to look to the international, your international relatives, the nations outside, especially outside of the global North, the West, the imperial, the ones under the purview of the matrix of disinformation that we're talking about, the ones that don't have VR goggles on, living in some weird either dystopian science fiction reality or some Star Trek utopia where there's only white people on Mars. That's neither of which you're living in virtual reality land. And as long as that's a joke in near future too. There's like millions of people just are like living in coffin apartments, living in virtual reality, and like being ground up and intravenously fed to each other as everyone freezes to death. And it's like, it's very sad that like London and New York City appear to be on that trajectory, because it's like, you guys have resources. You guys like could, if you move to like change these things, but you appear to it's not, and I can't really like blame my own family going like, why don't you guys want to like just liberate yourself from the people that are starving you to death and putting jet fuel in your water, right? But my parents will insist to like, I feel like they might. I try my best, but I can't bang my head on the wall going, arguing with my mom and dad. Mom and dad, we're Native Hawaiians. Like, no, we're not. We're white Americans. And I'm like, Dad, you guys are like drinking jet fuel, man. We're like trying to decolonize in the big island of Hawaii. We're trying to like build the dual power structure so we can take back eventually this entire country that is illegally occupied. And they don't want to hear it, And it's like, so I like, Dad, you got to like listen to Luna, like listen to the. But he's like too busy being stuck in CNN. I mean, so like being stuck too much in any Western media, even like what calls itself left Western media, is like it can be poison, and it leads to doomerang when you could see that there's change, and that's anyway. So that's like, I'll cut that off there. So I think it's important to listen to what's actually happening outside from the voices that are authentically. And they're gonna make it hard. That's why like we have lots of resources with like Progressive International and Luna and people that have been with us. They're basically saying anyone that's coming from outside is either a China or Russian agent. I've been called a Russian agent. I simultaneously I'm a black person, I'm a Hawaiian person who wants white genocide, and I'm a green-haired SJW wokeist who is trying to take away white guy's girlfriend. So that's a really weird accusation. I'm a quantum silver spoon. I'm like a Schrodinger's black, brown dude and white woman at the same time. So
well, I was seeing, like like interracial, I received attack from those people because, I happen to marry a tactical white dude who literally denied white supremacy and whiteness. But anyway, it sucks,
I gotta say, I want to point out a factor here when we were talking about COVID still going on. An actual real factor, the South Pole ice caps are melting. There's stuff deep within there that hasn't seen the light of day since the dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
that are still alive and kicking,
Hmm.
microorganisms and shit. So,
The
yeah.
future is great.
Um,
Yeah.
Luma Hana, if I said
L-
that wrong, please forgive me. Um,
Limahana.
yeah, they had a question, and I think that pertains to both me and Silver Spook. What are your thoughts on Jeff Bezos donating to Native Collective for land back? You want to go at it first, Kola?
I've been talking for a long time, but I'll just say, that there was a lot of stuff that have been said about Lambeck. I think it might have been from like last year. And but I just want to say that Jeff Bezos also spent $45 million that same week when he gave like less than a quarter of that to support Lambeck, but he bought basically like hundreds of acres of Hawaii, and he's literally like he's altering Hawaii's laws. I mean, it's a complicated status, but it's like he's altering the laws so that he can buy the ocean. You cannot own the ocean in Hawaii. It's like you got the ocean is for everyone. It's like one of the last things that's collective. Like
Mm.
one might say communistic, but Bezos is literally altering, like with
Mm.
Mark Zuckerberg also, he bought like 1,200 acres, and so there's this narrative that like, oh, Lineback is just a slogan and we shouldn't do it
Tax
because
write off.
yeah.
It's
You
just
know,
like,
I
like it's just a thing, the capitalists always, recuperate our slogan and our, movement so they can just like make use of
Hmm.
it. Yeah, I mean, yeah, the rainbow capitalism. Yeah, forget about that.
Mm.
I gotta say, um, I ain't seen any of that money at all. I'm sitting here.
Where's my
Um,
Bezos money?
yeah,
Yeah.
where's this Bezos money? Because like literally, I'm sitting here having to pay rent in a city for an apartment, and I don't have
Hmm.
my own land and home yet.
Yeah.
So where's this money? I ain't seen
Yeah.
it.
Hmm.
I ain't seen it either. I was like, again, it's like
Yeah,
stuff
dude,
gets
if a
worse.
billionaire decided to like give money to us, I'm gonna fucking take it. The fuck? Are you kidding me? Of course they're gonna take it.
It's a write
It's
off. It's a
just like,
tax write off, and it's PR for
yeah, also, you know what? Like, like I've been criticizing the US a lot for bombing us back to the Stone Age just 50 years ago. So, like lots of, bootlickers who said, oh, so what are you saying? Like, when the USAID, the USAID gave a few, like some money to Vietnam, why did you take it? It's like, are you ding dong? Of course we will take it. We're fucking poor country, and if you give us a few $1 million, yeah, thanks, we're gonna fucking take it. But that doesn't mean we're gonna like start licking the boots. No way. But we're gonna fucking take it because we are practical people. We're not just like, yeah, ding dong like that. So I mean, long story short. By the way, I just saw this comment. This is awesome. I just got greeted by a bunch of teens who say they're fans of Luna. Like, what?
Hey.
Really? Teens? We have some hope for the future, actually.
there you go. You have a
Nice.
basic.
I'm very happy to see that. Oh, actually, we are, you know what, we are over time. I think that we have about 10 to 15 minutes before the show ends. Is it, it would be really great, if you have any, final message you want to send, to talk to tell to the audience today. Let's start with, Lostsioux. What do you want to say to the chat?
All right. Okay. So I just want to remind everybody that in so-called Canada, on the 30th of this month, it is Orange Shirt Day. It is the first official um, Canada-wide holiday for honoring and remembering all the Indigenous people who either went to residential school and survived, or those that never made it home. Um, so if you truly claim that you're an ally, please remember to try and wear something orange. And then make sure
Mm.
that you try and get yourself an orange shirt at least. Um, if not, one that has every child matters. Especially try and get them from an indigenous retailer, not Walmart. Um, also, as well, that Friday on the 30th. I will be doing a stream, an all day and evening stream, welcoming people to come and share the very first official um, Orange Shirt Day um, with me on stream to honor, because first things first, my auntie and my uncle and 402 of my cousins were a part of the 404 that were found at the Brandon, Manitoba residential school in unmarked graves. My mom went to residential school. My grandma and grandpa went to residential school. Their mom and dad went to residential school. And I also had spent a few years in residential school as a teenager. Um, so, um, just so you're all aware, any donations or whatever is all being forgone, and it's all being put towards or being promoted towards and being pushed towards the residential school survivors donation link. I'm not going to be wanting or asking, or nor am I going to be accepting. I won't be accepting anything. I want it all to go there. Um, so everybody's welcome to come, join in, hang out. If you want to jump in the voice chat and hang out with us all, more than welcome. Um, and I just want to honor my relatives, my late relatives, um, by honoring them that day for that, because there's still a long way to go from healing within truth and reconciliation
Yeah.
towards that path. So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Mm.
Yeah, well, me and Israel also trying to, because we are in the middle of moving right now. It's really like I just got a bunch of boxes, like packing everything up and move to a new house. But I will try my best to to join the stream as we could. How about you, Saber? What do you want to share to the audience
Wow.
today?
Okay. I mean, first of all, yeah, no, amazing words from you, Lostsioux. It's always great. It's always great to be able to speak to you and everyone else as well. I don't know. It's been a while. I haven't like made an appearance in a little while. I think the last time was probably um in terms of just being online. I think I made a video essay around this time last year, I think, with Saint Andrew,
Mm,
talking about the Haitian Revolution
mm,
and the history and stuff and what's going on today. But I took a massive hiatus in terms of having to like engage in the real world for like that time and be like, all right, I gotta like do real world stuff and stuff. So yeah, I mean, I think this is the first like thing that I've done in like several months, if not a year, and
wow.
it's been
Mm,
interesting to like get back to just engaging with the comrades across the planet, such as yourselves, Lena, Silver Spook, and Lostsioux, and everyone in the chat too.
Mm.
And again, I don't know how many of you are still here from when we first started streaming, but yeah, don't think I've ever done any like face reveal or anything until now. I just thought it's about
wow.
time.
I'm
Yeah,
honored.
yeah. I mean, yeah. I just thought, you know what? I mean, yeah, it's about time. Why not? Why not? So
No.
it was a great conversation, and I think, um, like these are conversations that we need to be having on a more regular basis, I'd say, like for sure. Not only talking about it, but then also directing that towards real world action as well. Because as we've been saying, like the I mean, we're on
Yeah.
the clock. We don't
Clock is
have a
ticking.
lot of time. Exactly, yeah. But yeah, in terms of me personally, I do have several projects in the works that should be manifesting themselves soon. Um, I'm very much looking forward to those. Some interesting collaborations with other content creators as well. Some of them involve pretty practical steps in terms of, let's say, the prospects of like rare earth elements and conversations around geoengineering and like technological development in Africa and stuff like that. Historically, as well as like going forward in the future and stuff. So like very sort of Pan African type content talking about that specifically. There's also some more specific like UK related stuff that I want to get into as well. This recent situation with Elizabeth passing and stuff, like with the monarchy and the UK political scene, with Liz Truss becoming the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom and stuff like that. I've had a lot of thoughts that I haven't really put out there and stuff. So like there's a bunch of stuff to talk about in terms of the current political landscape, and we've spoken a bit about that today, but you can definitely expect more video essay stuff related to that, or more like live conversations as well. I'm definitely down to like come on to like have more of these kinds of conversations too, because I think sharing ideas in this way is also like super important, and also just very much like helped me to be I'm sure you will feel the same way as well, like somewhat inspired as well, like when it comes to like leaving these conversations and having to re-engage with the real world, especially if you're living somewhere like in the UK, for instance, or in London, whereby you're not really around that much like revolutionary sentiment in a day-to-day life, and so it can feel quite alienating to have to participate in the system day to day without having at least some community to really have to have, of people that have a more like grounded material analysis on what's going on and charting paths forward and stuff like that as well. So like, there's a lot of there's a lot, as much as the sort of online landscape does have a lot of issues in terms of, and especially people like Gina, you've spoken about it a lot, right, in terms of the sort of like debating and all of this kind of stuff, like, oh, there's a lot of like stuff going on, like it's like, oh geez, but then it's up to us to actually change that landscape and to figure out how to actually build like stronger communities whereby we can actually come together and to like not alienate people that are like true to the cause, so really try to build stronger communities, and then to also, as I said before, direct that into like real world action to try to further increase the likelihood that we will move towards the kind of future that is sustainable, that is inclusive, that doesn't alienate people from the very fabric of reality. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm optimistic despite everything that I've said today. Despite
we have a word to say it. We call it like revolutionary optimistic.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean that like we just like blindly believe in the future. We are very realistic and practical. We are like materialist, but because of that, we still have some hope for the future. Because we probably believe that we can change it. So revolutionary optimistic. I am one of that too. Yeah.
Same.
And seriously, like we need to hear more from you. Like like perspective of non-white people in the UK, because I gotta say that it is true that we haven't heard much from the UK lately. No, we haven't. And it is literally like, the hermit kingdom of Commonwealth, the so-called United Kingdom. That mostly we just hear like good news about you, and that's it. How rich you are and how awesome the royal family is. The life is awesome, blah blah. And we don't hear much from non-white people's perspective at all. So we really would love to hear more from you.
I'll make that happen. And like to Psychrum, who said in the comments, I've only heard from Novara Media. Yeah, like they are one of the channels, Novara Media, that is like doing the good work. But they are like few and far between. There's like so little of like people that are doing that kind of stuff, that like we definitely need to hear like more people. And so like I definitely say that I plan on doing a lot more like stuff like that, tying in UK related context to the whole global context as well as putting a few a little sprinkle of Afrofuturist seasoning as well, so you can expect a lot of that, but thanks for having me on
thank you so much for sharing that your plan with us, and we're like really much looking forward for that. What about you, Silver Spook, from the illegal occupied nation of Hawaii?
US, stop illegally occupying. Thanks a lot. I put I I put a little link. Just like I got so much stuff we're doing. Holly helped me put it together, and Holly does a lot of work. Special thanks to Holly for doing at least half of all the Silver Spook cooperative work. I remember to,
Can we call Holly our technical white dudette? Because I call my partner EJ the technical white dude, and Holly's our technical white dudette.
There you go, technical white dudette. You see, I can't be racist against white people. I married a white person.
Yeah, right. You can't be anti-white racist.
Yeah, it's like, how do I genocide? We genociding like half of my, anyways. But it's anyways. Yeah, thanks a lot to Holly for helping with that, and also, yeah, it was always great to, be with our brother Sue, and really, we'll definitely we'll see if we can make it, and we'll at least share the event next Friday. Really important to support Indigenous peoples everywhere, and Canada is not the utopia, so please do everything you can to help spread the word and support the people suffering under that occupation. And so, anyways, and also Saber, good to see you. I'm glad that you got to come. I had Saber on a few panels like last year, mostly talking about cyberpunk, science fiction, and futurism, Afrofuturism, and indigenous futurism. So yeah, it's good to be with our indigenous nerds and cyber POCs and sci-fi. I read The Deep, which is a really good book. Speaking of Black Mermaids, looking at racist Disney people. Anyways,
where do you see they see Asian mermaid? They would go ape shit and you see Asian mermaid.
Asian mermaid. Oh my god. Asian mermaid gave that's where the virus came from. Ocean. No. I think like Saber. We had some recommendations that I recommend The Deep as well. Saber has a whole video on Saber's channel, and do check out that content. And I'm really interested to see what you put out about the African, Pan-African, history and the future of the rare earth and technologies that could be rolled out. And that sounds really cool. Got to keep up to date on that. And anyways, but yeah, you probably know who I am. I'm Silver. I mean, if you don't know who I am, I'm Silver Spook. I'm Native Hawaiian. By the way, just some people might ask. I don't know if they ask, but sometimes they ask, what flag is that? That's actually not the official flag of Hawaii. That is it's a Kanaka Maoli flag it was inspired by symbols of the Ali'i, or the leaders of Hawaii, coat of arms of Kamehameha, but it's not actually an official flag. This is the official flag of Hawaii.
Look at that.
Unfortunately, it has the Union Jack in. That's why I don't like to put it up, because it's a long story. I was like, I don't have enough time to tell a story, but this is the flag of Hawaii. That it is official. It is the official flag of the sovereign country of Hawaii. That has the Union Jack because of if we didn't pretend like Europeans were the most advanced people, like we were talking about, they would have fully colonized us, and we wouldn't have a century of independent kingdom, the most technologically advanced country with the highest literacy rate, 98%, outpacing every country, including all of Europe. The world's first universal healthcare system, 1859, by Emma Kaleleo Nalani Na'ea Rook, and also building an anti-imperialist coalition with, and also inspired Sun Yat-sen, the father of the revolution and the most advanced. So currently, the enemy of the capitalist empire, China, was the socialist revolutionary path in China, and the CPC by extension were inspired by Hawaii. So, long story short, it's a long ass story. It's hard. All these stories are long and complex. But as a Native Hawaiian, we have to remember our history. And I do a lot of on my Twitter, like in that link bonanza that I posted, has links to various. On the Twitter, I post about the Silver Spook guy. I post about Hawaiian history, my personal takes. I do YouTube video. I do like basically live streamed video, improv, essays every Saturday about a different topic, usually based on a pop culture. But they kind of talk about a lot of topics. But certainly it's Hawaiian sovereignty, anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist, from that perspective. And then I also talk about the game stuff is like the Silver Spook games is like the Neofeud and the Decolonizers, which I worked on with Luna Oi, and I'm working on more games. And the sequel to Neofeud is coming soon, which is a galaxy wide. It's like a saying it the quiet part super loud Star Wars. It's actually anti-imperialist, anti-racist Star Wars, where the Empire is red, white, and blue and has stars all over, because that's the real Empire. The problem with Star Wars is it's too communist and Asia coding all of the anti-imperialism. So I'm making Neofield 2 is going to be like it's going to be the most base game ever made in the history of the universe. And I dare EA, and I dare Activision, and I dare all those big tech game companies to outdo me. I know they won't, but anyway. So I make games. All you're freaking Elon standing CD Projekt Red, all your cyber suit, cyber bougie.
I hate Elon Musk so much.
2033, I don't know what it is, but anyway. Yeah. So, anyways, I make games, I make videos.
Your game is awesome. Your games are all awesome.
Yeah, especially the ones with Luna Oi in them, like Decolonators.
Decolonator.
You want to see Luna Oi wielding an AK-47, blowing John McCain out of the sky in his military jet.
And then Margaret Thatcher. Yep.
Speaking of the Queen, some people are still mad at me. They still think, Silver Spook, you're a revisionist with Luna because Margaret Thatcher was not the Queen of Britain. I said, bro, Britain doesn't even know their own freaking history anyway, so what does it matter?
It's so funny. The thing is that, like, here's the thing too, like, when the Imperial Court, they make video games of Vietnam evil commie. They just lump us together, the Chinese and the Vietnamese and Japanese all together. But when we do the same thing, we just lump the US and UK, the British together. They got mad because of that. Like, dude, you did exactly the same thing to us for decades. What's wrong with us doing exactly the same thing to you, you hypocrite? I'm sorry to lump the UK with the US though, Saber. But I'm sorry, but to us, like, the two countries are so much the same, Both belly and the beast. Like,
listen, no offense taken. No offense taken. Please, as much as humanly possible, please.
This is a really fun stream, and I really hope to have you back in the future stream, like future panel like this. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here, and thank you, the Raiders. Thank you for staying here, and see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Aloha.